Billionaire stops for a stranded driver, then recognizes his ex and secret twins. The rain hammered the windshield like bullets. The woman stood soaked on the highway shoulder, her silver SUV dead behind her, and when she turned and saw who had stopped to help, her face went pale as ash. Deja. Her name fell from his lips like a confession. 7 years of silence shattered in a single word. Xavier. Of all the people on this highway, of all the nights, of all the storms. His eyes moved past her, drawn by movement through the rain-streaked glass of her SUV. 2 small faces pressed against the window. 2 children watching with identical expressions of curiosity. 2 faces that looked impossibly, undeniably familiar. You have children. Yes, twins. How old are they, Deja? She did not answer. The rain continued to fall. The silence between them stretched like a wire about to snap. How old? 6. They will be 7 in February. He did the math. February meant they were conceived in May. May of 7 years ago. The last month, they were together. The month before everything between them fell apart. They are mine. It was not a question. It was a statement. It was an earthquake. She lifted her chin, that familiar gesture of defiance he had once loved and hated in equal measure. Biologically? Yes. In every other way that matters, they are mine. Only mine. And you do not get to stand here in the rain after 7 years of silence and claim them like property. The man who controlled a $4.2 billion shipping empire stood on the shoulder of a forgotten highway, rain soaking through his $10,000 suit, and felt his entire world collapse into rubble at his feet. What would you do if you discovered that the love of your life had been raising your children alone for 7 years? Children you never knew existed because of words you cannot even remember saying? This is the story of how a billionaire who thought he had everything discovered he had nothing that mattered, and how a single storm on a lonely highway gave him one last chance to become the man he should have been all along. Let me take you back to where this night began. 3 hours earlier, the rain had started falling over the stretch of highway between Asheville and the coast, turning the asphalt into a gray ribbon of uncertainty. Inside a midnight black Maybach, Xavier Robinson watched the storm through tinted windows while his mind wandered through quarterly reports and acquisition targets. The usual mental furniture of a man who had built an empire before turning 40. Louis, he said to his driver, a steady man in his 50s who had been with him for nearly a decade. How much longer until we reach the resort? About 40 minutes, sir. Assuming the weather does not get worse. Xavier nodded absently, his attention drifting back to the rain-streaked glass. He should have been reviewing the merger documents waiting in his briefcase. He should have been preparing for the board meeting scheduled for Monday morning. Instead, he found himself staring at nothing, thinking about everything and nothing at the same time. This was the problem with success, he had discovered. You spent your entire life climbing toward a peak, and when you finally reached it, you realized the view was just more mountains, more climbing, more emptiness dressed up as achievement. Louis glanced in the rearview mirror, reading his employer's mood with the accuracy of someone who had spent a decade learning his silences. Something on your mind, sir? Just tired, Louis. Long week. It was always a long week. Every week was long when you measured your life in deals closed and competitors crushed. Xavier had not taken a vacation in 3 years. He had not seen the inside of a movie theater in 5. He could not remember the last time he had done something simply because it brought him joy rather than profit. His phone buzzed with another email. Another crisis requiring his attention. Another fire that only he could extinguish. He silenced it without looking. Louis, do you ever wonder if we are doing this wrong? Building empires, chasing numbers, measuring success in zeros? The driver considered the question carefully before answering. I think, sir, that most men do not have the luxury of asking that question. They are too busy surviving to wonder about purpose. You have the luxury. The question is what you do with it. Xavier had no answer. He had not had an answer for 2 years, ever since he had stood at the pinnacle of his success and realized he had never felt more alone. The Maybach's headlights cut through the rain, illuminating the empty highway ahead. Wealthy men had a way of insulating themselves from the chaos of ordinary life. Private cars, private planes, private everything. Xavier moved through the world in a bubble of comfort that kept reality at arm's length. But some things could not be kept out. Some storms found you no matter how high your walls. Sir, Louis's voice sharpened with concern, there is a vehicle on the shoulder ahead. It appears someone is in trouble. Through the rain, Xavier could make out a silver SUV with its hazard lights blinking weakly. The hood was up, steam rising into the wet air. A figure stood beside it, hunched against the downpour, waving what looked like a phone flashlight. Should I stop? Xavier almost said no. He had a schedule. He had meetings waiting. He had a life that operated on precise timing, where every minute was accounted for and efficiency was the highest virtue. Stopping for strangers was not part of his protocol, but something made him pause. Perhaps it was the way the figure looked so small against the storm. Perhaps it was a memory from years ago, when he had stopped for a stray dog on the side of a different road, a dog that now slept on a custom bed in his penthouse, and was the closest thing to family he had. Pull over. Louis guided the Maybach to the shoulder, parking safely behind the stranded vehicle. Before the driver could object or offer to handle the situation himself, Xavier was already opening his door and stepping into the rain. The cold hit him immediately, soaking through his clothes, plastering his hair to his forehead. He squinted against the downpour as he approached the figure by the SUV. She turned at the sound of his footsteps, phone lights swinging in his direction. And time stopped. She was older now. Her face carried 7 years of living that he had missed. But he would have known her anywhere. The curve of her jaw, the way she held herself, defiant even in distress. Those eyes that had once looked at him like he was everything and then, in their final moment together, like he was nothing at all. Deja. Her name fell from his lips before he could stop it, before he could prepare himself, before he could construct any of the careful defenses he had built over 7 years of trying to forget her. She froze. Recognition flooded her features, followed immediately by something that made his stomach drop. Fear. She was afraid. Xavier. Her voice was steady, but he heard the tremor beneath it. Of all the people on this highway, are you okay? What happened? Engine light came on. Then everything died. I've been calling for a tow truck, but they are saying 2 hours minimum because of the storm. She was deflecting, keeping things practical, refusing to acknowledge the impossibility of this moment. 7 years of silence. And now they stood on a forgotten highway, while the sky poured down around them like the universe itself was trying to wash away the past. But Xavier barely heard her explanation. His attention had been captured by movement behind her through the rain-spattered windows of the SUV. 2 small faces, pressed against the glass, watching with curiosity that cut through the storm and the years and the careful distance Deja was trying to maintain. Children, 2 of them, their features catching enough light that he could see dark curls, wide eyes, faces that looked startlingly familiar in ways he could not immediately name. You have children. The words came out strange, thick with something he could not identify. Deja's expression shuddered. Walls slammed down so fast he could almost hear them. Yes, twins. How old? The question hung between them. The rain continued to fall, and still she did not answer. Deja, how old are your children? 6. They will be 7 in February. Xavier did the math. 7 years ago. February birth meant conception in May. The last month, they were together. The month before Victoria. The month before everything fell apart. They are mine. It was not a question. It was a statement of fact that rearranged everything he thought he knew about his life. Deja's chin lifted. That familiar gesture of defiance he had once found maddening and magnificent in equal measure. Biologically? Yes, in every other way that matters. They are mine. Only mine. The world tilted beneath Xavier's feet. He reached for the hood of the SUV, steadying himself against metal that was already cooling in the rain. Children. His children. 6 years old. And he had never known they existed. Why? The word came out broken, inadequate for the magnitude of what he was asking. Why did you not tell me? We are not doing this here. Deja's voice was sharp enough to cut through the storm. Not in the rain. Not on the side of a highway. And definitely not in front of them. She gestured toward the SUV, where the 2 faces were still watching, their expressions shifting from curiosity to concern as they picked up on the tension radiating from the adults. Louis appeared at Xavier's elbow, umbrella in hand, his presence steady and practical. Sir, perhaps I could escort the lady and her children to our vehicle while we sort out the towing situation. They should not be standing in this weather. It was the sensible solution. Xavier watched Deja's internal struggle play out across her face. Accept help from the man who had apparently wronged her enough to hide his own children from him, or stand in a storm with 2 6-year-olds. Practicality won. It always did with Deja. She had never been one for dramatic gestures when practical solutions existed. Fine, but we need car seats. They are in the back of my SUV. 10 minutes later, everyone was installed in the MyBox climate-controlled interior. The twins sat between Xavier and Deja, their car seats somehow fitting in the spacious back seat. Louis had transferred luggage and coordinated with the tow company with a quiet competence that made him invaluable. The children studied Xavier with open curiosity. The boy had dark curls and a serious expression, something analytical in his gaze. He watched Xavier like a puzzle to be solved. The girl had her mother's eyes, warm and knowing, and she had already decided to smile at him. "I am Mira," the girl announced. "This is my brother Miles. We are twins, but we are not the same. I'm older by 6 minutes." 5 minutes, Miles corrected quietly, still studying Xavier with that measuring look. "Hello, Mira." Miles. Xavier's voice felt strange in his own throat, thick with emotions he could not name and did not know how to process. "I am Xavier. We know who you are." Miles spoke with the directness of a child who had not yet learned that some truths were better left unspoken. "You are on the covers of magazines. Mama has one in a drawer, but she does not know we found it." Deja closed her eyes briefly. A flash of something crossed her features. Embarrassment, perhaps, or regret, or something more complicated than either. "Where are we going?" Mira asked, apparently unbothered by the loaded silence filling the car. "We can drop you at a hotel," Xavier began, but Louis cleared his throat from the driver's seat. "Sir, I should mention, the storm has caused widespread power outages in the area. Most hotels are either full or closed. The resort where we have reservations has backup generators, but it is the only accommodation available for the next 50 miles. Xavier looked at Deja, whose expression suggested she would rather sleep in a ditch than accept his hospitality. "It is a large resort," he said carefully. "Separate suites. You would not have to see me at all after tonight. We have a reservation elsewhere, which you will miss because your car is currently being towed to a mechanic who will not be open until Monday." Xavier kept his voice neutral, reasonable, unthreatening. "The twins are tired and wet. Take the room. We can have whatever conversation needs to happen after they are settled." Deja looked at her children, who were indeed drooping with exhaustion after what had clearly been a long day of travel. Her jaw tightened, but Xavier saw the moment motherhood won over pride. "Fine. One night." The resort was everything you would expect from a property where Xavier Robinson kept a standing reservation. Elegant without being ostentatious. Discreet without being cold. Staffed by people trained to handle any request without judgment or unnecessary questions. Within an hour, Deja and the twins were installed in a suite with a connected bedroom. The children had been bathed and changed into hotel-provided pajamas. Room service was on its way. Xavier waited in the sitting area of his own suite down the hall, staring at the rain still hammering the windows, trying to process the complete upheaval of everything he thought he knew about his life. He had children, 2 of them, 6 years old. They had his eyes. They had Deja's determination, and they had spent their entire lives not knowing he existed. The knock at his door came 45 minutes later. He opened it to find Deja standing in the hallway, still in the same clothes from the roadside, her arms crossed over her chest like armor. "They are asleep," she said without preamble. "The concierge is keeping an eye on the suite. We can talk now, but I will not be long." He stepped aside to let her in. She moved past him, maintaining distance, and stopped in the center of the room like she was preparing for battle. "Before you say anything," she began, her voice carrying the careful control of someone who had rehearsed this conversation 1,000 times in her head, "I need you to understand something. What I did, keeping them from you, it was not cruelty for its own sake. It was survival. Survival." Xavier repeated the word, tasting its bitterness. "From what?" "From me. I would never have hurt you or them. You had already hurt me." The words landed like stones dropped into still water. Ripples spread outward, disturbing everything. "Do you even remember what happened?" Deja continued, her composure cracking slightly at the edges. "Do you remember telling me that your family's company would always come first? That children were not in your 5-year plan? That I was being unreasonable for wanting a future that included something other than watching you work 80-hour weeks?" Xavier remembered. He remembered all of it. The arguments that grew more frequent as his father's health declined. The growing distance between them as the company hemorrhaged money and he spent every waking moment trying to stop the bleeding. The desperation that made him say things he did not mean and mean things he could not say. I was 29 years old, Deja. My father had just died. The company was falling apart. You were terrified. She cut him off, but her voice had softened slightly. I know. I understood that then, and I understand it now. But Xavier, when I told you I was pregnant, do you remember what you said? The question hit him like a physical blow. The months after his father's death were a blur of crisis management and survival. 16-hour days, decisions that felt impossible. He had been drowning, and everything that was not directly related to keeping the company alive had faded into background noise. He searched his memory, trying to recall that specific conversation, but it was gone, lost in the fog of exhaustion and grief that had consumed him during those terrible months. I do not remember, he admitted. The words tasted like ash in his mouth. Deja nodded slowly, as if this confirmation of his obliviousness was exactly what she had expected. You said you could not deal with another complication. The words hung in the air between them. You said if I wanted to keep it, that was my choice, but you could not promise anything. You could not promise to be there. You could not promise to be present. You could not promise to be anything other than what you already were, a man drowning in his own ambition. Xavier sank onto the edge of a chair, his legs suddenly unreliable. I said that, you said that, and then you went back to your office, and I went back to our apartment, and I made a decision. I decided that my children deserved better than a father who saw them as complications. I decided to leave. The accusation settled over him like a shroud. He had done this. He had said those words, made that woman feel so unwelcome, so unwanted, that she had chosen to raise 2 children alone rather than stay with him. You should have given me a chance to prove you wrong. I gave you 7 years to come looking for me. The counter struck with surgical precision. Do you know how easy I would have been to find? Deja continued, her voice dropping to something that sounded almost like disappointment. I went home, Xavier. I went back to the town where I grew up, where my mother still lives, where my name is in the phone book. You could have found me any time, but you never looked. He had no defense, because she was right. He had not looked. He had told himself that she left because she wanted to, that pursuing her would have been disrespecting her choice, that he had too much else demanding his attention to chase someone who had made her feelings clear by leaving. But the truth was more cowardly than that. He had not looked because looking would have required admitting that he had failed at something that mattered. And Xavier Robinson did not fail. He succeeded at all costs, even when those costs included everything that might have made his success worth having. I was wrong. The words came out quietly, inadequate for the weight of what he was acknowledging. Everything you are describing. I was wrong, and I am sorry. That does not fix it. I know that, but I am sorry. Deja was quiet for a long moment. Some of the rigid defensiveness left her posture, replaced by something more complicated. I did not expect you to say that. What did you expect? Denial, deflection, the same things I got 7 years ago. I am not that person anymore. Xavier looked up at her, letting her see the truth of it. I spent 5 years building that company into something successful, and at the end of it, I had everything I had worked for and absolutely nothing that mattered. I have spent the last 2 years trying to figure out what matters. Apparently, I missed something crucial. He paused, gathering courage for a question he was afraid to ask. What are they like? Mira and Miles? The question seemed to catch Deja off guard. Some of the hardness in her expression softened, replaced by the unmistakable warmth of a mother talking about her children. Miles is brilliant, quiet and analytical, obsessed with how things work. He wants to be an engineer. He builds structures out of anything he can find and then tests whether they will collapse. Drives me crazy sometimes, finding towers of blocks and books in every corner of the house. And Mira? Mira is a force of nature. She decided at 4 years old that she was going to be a veterinarian, and she has never wavered. She brings home injured birds and once tried to adopt a raccoon. Had the whole argument prepared about why raccoons make good pets. She lost, but only barely. Xavier found himself smiling despite everything. They sound incredible. They are. They are the best thing I have ever done. And you? What have you done with the last 7 years, besides raising 2 incredible children alone? The question clearly surprised her. She hesitated before answering, as if deciding how much to reveal to someone who had forfeited the right to know. I went back to veterinary school. Finished my degree. I own a practice now. Small, mostly large animals. Horses, farm animals. It is not glamorous, but it is mine. I built a life, without any help from me, without any help from anyone. There was pride in her voice, earned and undeniable. I did not have parents with money or connections with influence. I had a baby on the way, a heart that was broken, and a determination to never be dependent on anyone who could leave. And now, Xavier asked carefully, now that you know I am here, now that I know about them, what happens? I do not know. The admission seemed to cost her something. I spent 7 years planning for every scenario except this one. Running into you by accident on the side of a highway while you were chauffeured around in a car that costs more than my house. Do you want me involved? In their lives? The question hung between them. Deja walked to the window, staring out at the storm that was finally beginning to ease. What I want is for them to have a father who shows up, not one who makes grand gestures and then disappears, not one who buys his way out of actual parenting. If you cannot be that consistently, permanently, then I would rather you stay a stranger they see on magazine covers. And if I can be that, she turned to face him, her expression unreadable. Then we figure it out, slowly, carefully, with their well-being as the only priority. I can do that. I want to do that. Wanting is not enough, Xavier. Doing is what matters. You wanted a lot of things 7 years ago. Your wants did not mean much when they conflicted with your ambition. I know, and I know that nothing I say right now will convince you that I have changed. Words are cheap, but I am asking for the chance to prove it. Not for me, for them. They deserve to know their father, and I deserve the opportunity to be worth knowing. Deja studied him for a long moment, searching for something in his face. Whatever she found there made her shoulders drop slightly, some of the battle readiness leaving her stance. We will start small. Phone calls, video chats. You can see them again in 2 weeks, supervised. If that goes well, we will discuss next steps. Thank you. Do not thank me yet. This is not about you. It is about 2 children who have been asking questions about their father for years. Questions I have been deflecting because I did not know how to tell them the truth. What did you tell them? That their father was someone I loved very much who was not ready to be a parent. That it was complicated. That someday, when they were older, I would explain everything. And now I will have to figure out how to explain that someday is today, and their father just happened to stop for us on the side of a highway in the middle of a storm. Xavier wanted to say something profound, something that would bridge 7 years of absence and pain and misunderstanding. But there were no words adequate to the task. I will not let them down, he said instead. I know you have no reason to believe that, but I promise you, I will not let them down. Deja moved toward the door, the conversation apparently concluded. I have heard your promises before, Xavier. They did not mean much then. Show me they mean something now. She paused with her hand on the doorknob, looking back at him one final time. Get some sleep. The storm is passing. Tomorrow is going to be complicated. Then she was gone, leaving Xavier alone with the rain and the silence and the weight of everything he had missed. He did not sleep that night. Instead, he stood at the window watching the storm gradually exhaust itself, thinking about 2 children with his eyes sleeping down the hall. Children he had never known existed because of words he could not even remember saying. 6 years. They were 6 years old. They had learned to walk without him, spoken their first words without him, started school without him. They had scraped knees and lost teeth, and had nightmares and birthday parties and thousands of ordinary moments that made up a childhood. And he had been absent for all of it. Not just absent, oblivious, so wrapped up in his empire building that he had not even noticed the hole where his family should have been. His phone buzzed on the nightstand. Work emails piling up. The Monday board meeting requiring preparation. The endless machinery of his success demanding attention. He silenced it without looking. For the first time in as long as he could remember, the company could wait. Everything could wait, because somewhere down the hall, his children were sleeping, and tomorrow he would have to figure out how to be their father. Dawn came slowly, the storm leaving behind a washed, clean world that smelled of rain and new beginnings. Xavier was already dressed and waiting when his phone rang. Sir, Lewis's voice carried its usual calm competence. The lady and her children are in the breakfast room. Shall I inform them you will be joining them? No. Give them space. I will wait until she reaches out. Very good, sir. And if I may say so, Congratulations. They seem like wonderful children. Xavier had forgotten how little escaped Lewis's notice. Thank you. I am still processing the wonderful part. He spent the morning pretending to review documents while actually rehearsing conversations in his head. What did you say to children you had just discovered exactly? How did you explain 6 years of absence to minds that had not yet learned the complicated algebra of adult failure? The knock came just after 10. Xavier opened the door to find Mira standing in the hallway, her mother visible further down the corridor, watching with arms crossed but making no move to intervene. Hi. Mira looked up at him, with those eyes that were so much like Deja's, it made his chest ache. Mama says we are having a meeting. About important things. That is right. Xavier crouched down to her level, bringing himself to her eye height. Is that okay with you? I guess. Mira tilted her head, studying him with the unfiltered curiosity of childhood. Are you really our dad? The question hit him like a wave he had not seen coming. Yes, I am. Then how come we never met you before? Xavier glanced at Deja, who gave the slightest nod. Permission to navigate this conversation honestly. That is complicated, he said carefully. Your mama and I had a relationship that ended badly, and she made the decision to raise you on her own. I did not know you existed until last night. Mira processed this with surprising equanimity. So you did not choose to not be our dad. You just did not know. That is right. I just did not know. But now you know. Now I know. So what are you going to do about it? The question was so direct, so purely practical, that Xavier almost laughed. He was being interrogated by a 6-year-old, and she was better at it than most of the executives he had faced across boardroom tables. I would like to get to know you, both you and your brother, if you will let me. Mira considered this for a moment, her small face serious with deliberation. Miles is harder to get to know than me. He does not trust people until they prove they are trustworthy. But I am easier. I like giving people chances. Then I will start with you, Xavier said. And I will earn Miles's trust. Okay. Mira nodded, as if they had just concluded a successful negotiation. Mama says we are having breakfast together. You can sit next to me if you want. But Miles will probably ask you lots of questions. He does that. I can handle questions. The breakfast was surreal. Xavier sat at a table in the resort's dining room, surrounded by the ordinary sounds of clinking silverware and murmured conversations, while across from him sat the children he had never known he had. Miles watched him with that analytical gaze throughout the meal, asking questions that seemed designed to test for something. What do you do for work? Where do you live? Do you have any pets? Why did you stop for us last night? Xavier answered each question honestly, sensing that this child would detect any attempt at deception or deflection. I run a shipping company. I live in an apartment in the city. I have a dog named Biscuit. I stopped because you seemed like you needed help. Most people do not stop, Miles observed. Mama says most people do not want to get involved in other people's problems. Your mama is right. Most people do not. But I did. Why? Xavier considered the question carefully. Because sometimes the thing you need most is something you do not know you are looking for until you find it. Miles processed this with visible skepticism, but said nothing further. Xavier counted it as progress. After breakfast, Deja pulled him aside while the twins explored the hotel lobby. I have been thinking about how to handle this. She kept her voice low, her eyes on her children. You asked for a chance. I'm going to give you one. But there are rules. Whatever you need. Phone calls first. Video chats. You can call them twice a week, no more than 15 minutes each time. I reserve the right to end any call that seems to upset them. Agreed. In 2 weeks you can visit. Supervised. I will be present for the entire visit. If that goes well, we can discuss expanding the arrangement. Agreed. And Xavier. Deja met his eyes directly, her expression deadly serious. If you make a commitment to these children, you keep it. No matter what. You do not get to decide 3 months from now that fatherhood is inconvenient. You do not get to prioritize work over their recital, or their birthday, or their ordinary Tuesday needs. They have gone 6 years without a father. If you are going to be in their lives, you are all in. There is no halfway. I understand. Do you? Because 7 years ago, you told me the company would always come first. That has to change if you want this. It has already changed. Xavier held her gaze, letting her see the truth of his words. The company was my father's legacy. But children are my legacy. I see that now. I did not see it before. And that is my failure. But I see it now. Deja studied him for a long moment, searching for cracks in his conviction. I hope so, she said finally, for their sake. Because they are already excited about the possibility of having a father. If you disappoint them, I will never forgive you. And more importantly, they will never forget it. I will not disappoint them. Actions, not words, Xavier. Show me. The parting was awkward in the way that all new arrangements are awkward. Xavier crouched down to say goodbye to the twins, unsure of the appropriate protocol for ending a conversation with children you had only just met. Mira solved the problem by throwing her arms around his neck in an unexpected hug. Bye, Xavier. Call us tomorrow, okay? I will. I promise. Miles hung back, offering only a solemn nod of acknowledgement. The tow truck came for Deja's SUV. The mechanic confirmed it would need several days of repairs. Xavier offered to arrange a rental car, to drive them wherever they needed to go, to help in any way he could. Deja accepted the rental car. She declined everything else. We have been taking care of ourselves for 6 years. We do not need a rescue. We just need to get home. Xavier watched them drive away, Deja at the wheel, the twins waving through the back window until the car disappeared around a bend in the road. Then he was alone, standing in the parking lot of a luxury resort, soaked in morning sunlight, his entire worldview rearranged by a chance encounter in a storm. Sir, Lewis appeared at his elbow, ever present, ever steady. What would you like to do? Xavier looked at his phone. 37 unread emails. 6 voicemails. The machinery of his empire demanding attention. He silenced it all. Cancel my meetings for the next week. I need to think. Very good, sir. And if I may say so, you handled that very well. The children seem to like you. Mira likes me. Miles is reserving judgment. He is a careful one, that boy. But careful people, once they decide to trust you, they trust you completely. Earn his trust and you will have it forever. Xavier hoped that was true, because he was about to stake everything that mattered on the gamble that people could change, that second chances were real, and that somewhere inside the man who had failed so spectacularly 7 years ago, there was a father waiting to be born. And so, the waiting began. True to his word, Xavier called 2 days later. The conversation was stilted at first. Mira did most of the talking, filling the silence with stories about school and friends and the elaborate fantasy world she had constructed involving purple dragons and magical kingdoms. Miles listened more than he spoke, occasionally interjecting with corrections to his sister's stories or questions for Xavier that felt like tests. What time do you wake up in the morning? Around 6. That is when we wake up too. Mama says early risers get more done. Your mama is a smart woman. Do you build things? I build companies. Does that count? Not really. I mean real things. With your hands. Structures that you can touch. Xavier thought about it. I used to build model ships when I was young. My father taught me. Could you teach me? The question caught Xavier off guard. It's simplicity. It's invitation. This small boy offering him a chance to connect over something tangible and real. I would like that very much. The calls became a rhythm. Tuesday evenings and Saturday mornings. Mira's exuberance filling the first half, Miles's careful observations anchoring the second. Xavier found himself looking forward to these conversations in a way he had never anticipated. The sound of his children's voices became a highlight of his week, a break in the monotony of board meetings and acquisition discussions that had once been his entire existence. 2 weeks after the storm, Xavier flew to Deja's town for his first supervised visit. The town was small in the way that places far from major cities are small. One main street with locally owned businesses, a church on every corner, the kind of place where everyone knew everyone and strangers were noticed immediately. Xavier's arrival in a rented luxury sedan caused exactly the stir he had expected. By the time he pulled up to Deja's modest but well-maintained house on a tree-lined street, he was fairly certain every resident within a 3-block radius had noted his presence. Deja met him at the door, her expression unreadable. The twins are in the backyard. They have been up since 5 asking when you would get here. That is a good sign, right? It is a sign that you have built up expectations. Now you have to meet them. The backyard was a chaos of childhood. A swing set, slightly weathered. A sandbox that had clearly seen years of use. And in the middle of it all, 2 children who stopped their play the moment they saw him. You came. Mira's face split into a grin. Mama said you would, but Miles said we should wait and see. I told you I would come. Xavier crouched down to their level. I always keep my promises. Miles watched from a few feet away, not approaching, not retreating, waiting. What do you want to do? Xavier asked them. I have all day. Whatever you want. Can we go to the park? Mira asked immediately. There is a big one with a climbing wall and everything. Xavier looked at Deja for approval. She nodded slightly. The park it is. The day unfolded in a series of small moments that, taken individually, meant nothing, but together began to construct the foundation of something new. Xavier pushed Mira on swings until his arms ached. He watched Miles attempt the climbing wall 17 times before finally reaching the top. He bought ice cream that dripped down small hands and required emergency napkin interventions. And through it all, Deja watched, assessing, looking for cracks. You are good with them. She said it reluctantly, as if the admission cost her something. I am trying. Trying is more than I expected. What did you expect? Honestly, I expected you to cancel, or to show up and be uncomfortable, or to spend the whole time on your phone dealing with work emergencies. Xavier pulled out his phone and showed her the screen. 32 missed calls, 47 unread messages, his chief operations officer increasingly frantic in his attempts to reach him. I turned off notifications this morning. The company can survive one day without me. This matters more. Something shifted in Deja's expression. Not trust, not yet, but perhaps the beginning of belief that trust might be possible. Do not miss those calls on my account, she said. The kids need their nap anyway. We should head back. The goodbye was easier this time. Mira hugged him without hesitation. Miles offered a handshake that felt like progress. Same time in 2 weeks? Xavier asked Deja. Same time. And so it went. 2 weeks became a month. A month became 2 months. Xavier flew in for every visit without exception. He called on every scheduled day, without fail. He remembered details the twins mentioned and followed up on them. Mira's spelling test, Miles's science project, the drama of first-grade social dynamics that seemed to matter so much to them. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, the walls began to lower. It was 3 months after the storm when Mira presented Xavier with a test. Mama says people who want to be trusted have to prove they can take care of things. So we decided you have to prove you can take care of something before we let you take care of us more. Xavier looked at Deja, who was clearly trying not to smile. What did you have in mind? A fish. Mira held up a picture she had drawn. A purple betta fish. His name will be Sir Scales a lot. You have to keep him alive and healthy for a whole month. If you can do that, Miles says maybe you are responsible enough to be a real dad. Miles had stepped forward now, his expression serious. Betta fish require specific water temperatures, he informed Xavier. Between 75 and 80 degrees Fahrenheit. They need to eat twice a day, but only what they can consume in 2 minutes. Overfeeding causes health problems. Do you understand? Xavier accepted the assignment with equal seriousness. I understand. I will research everything about betta fish care before I get one. Good. Miles nodded approval. Most adults do not research. They just assume they know things. But you cannot assume with living creatures. You have to know. That night, after the twins were in bed, Xavier sat on Deja's porch while she stood in the doorway. The fish test, she said. That was not my idea. They came up with it on their own. They are remarkable kids. They are, and they are taking this seriously. If you fail the fish test, Miles will use it as evidence that you cannot be trusted with bigger responsibilities. He has been burned before. By whom? Deja was quiet for a moment. There was a man, about 2 years ago. I thought it might become serious. The kids met him a few times. And then one day he decided commitment was too much work and disappeared. I am sorry. Miles took it hardest. He thought that man might be a father figure. When he left, Miles decided that all men eventually leave. That trusting them is a mistake. Xavier felt the weight of that settle over him. He was not just proving himself to Mira's easy openness. He was fighting against Miles's careful constructed defenses, fighting against every man who had ever let that boy down. I will pass the fish test, Xavier said, and then I will pass every other test he throws at me. However long it takes, whatever it requires. I will show him that not all men leave. I hope you mean that. I do. Deja studied him for a long moment in the porch light. You are different than you were, she said finally. I did not want to see it at first. It was easier to believe you were still the same man who told me I was a complication. I was different then, broken in ways I did not know how to recognize. But I have done the work. Therapy, self-examination, learning to see what actually matters instead of what I thought was supposed to matter. When did you start therapy? 3 years ago. After I built the company into everything I ever wanted and realized I had never felt more empty. Did it help? It helped me understand why I became the person who could say those things to you. It helped me see how I inherited my father's patterns. It helped me decide I wanted to be different. But understanding is not the same as becoming. That part takes practice, daily practice. I am still learning. Deja nodded slowly, processing this. I went to therapy too, she said. After I left you, I was so angry, and the anger was making it hard to be a good mother. I needed to find a way to let it go without letting you off the hook. Did it work? Some days. Other days, I still want to throw things at your head. That is fair. They sat in silence for a moment, the night sounds of the small town filling the space between them. I should go, Xavier said. But before I do, I want to ask you something. Not about the kids, about you. What about me? Are you happy, Deja? Beyond being a mother, beyond your success with the practice, beyond everything you have built on your own. Are you happy? The question clearly caught her off guard. I am content, she said carefully. I have work that matters. Children I adore. A life I built from nothing. That is more than most people get. Content is not happy. Maybe not. But it is stable. And after 6 years of fighting for stability, I will take it over the chaos of chasing happiness. I did that to you, made you choose survival over joy. You were part of it. But I made my own choices. I chose to leave. I chose to start over. I chose to build something that could not be taken from me. Those were my decisions, and I do not regret them, even if they cost you happiness. She looked at him with those eyes that had haunted him for 7 years. Happiness is overrated, Xavier. It is a feeling that comes and goes. Stability is what keeps you alive when feelings fail. That is enough for me. Before Xavier could respond, his phone buzzed. Work, finally demanding attention. Go, Deja said. Answer your calls. Run your empire. I will see you in 2 weeks. He wanted to say something more, something that might bridge the distance between content and happy. But the moment had passed, and some conversations needed more than a single night to unfold. 2 weeks, he agreed. Then he was gone, driving through dark streets toward his temporary hotel, his mind full of purple fish and careful children, and a woman who had learned to survive by expecting nothing from anyone. The fish, when he finally acquired it, was indeed purple. Xavier had spent 2 weeks researching betta fish care with the same intensity he once devoted to merger agreements. He purchased a tank with precise temperature controls. He studied feeding schedules and water quality maintenance. He video-called Miles to report on his preparations, earning a grudging nod of approval. Sir, scales a lot arrived in a small container from a specialty aquarium shop. Xavier transferred him to his new tank with careful attention to temperature acclimation, exactly as the research recommended. The fish swam in lazy circles, unaware of how much depended on his continued survival. 1 month later, Xavier arrived at Deja's house carrying the fish tank. Mira raced out to meet him, peering into the tank with delighted eyes. He is alive, and he looks happy. Look how his fins are all spread out. That means he is healthy. Miles approached more slowly, examining the tank with scientific scrutiny. Water temperature? 77 degrees. I check it twice daily. Feeding schedule? Twice a day. Small portions. I keep a log. Miles studied the fish for a long moment. Then he looked up at Xavier. You passed. 2 words. But they meant everything. Does this mean I can take you both somewhere special next time I visit? Where? Mira demanded. Xavier looked at Deja for permission. She nodded slightly. I was thinking we could go to the Science Museum in the city. They have an exhibit on engineering and architecture that Miles might like, and an animal rehabilitation center attached that Mira would love. Can we, Mama? Mira was already bouncing. Please. Deja considered for a moment that felt like an eternity. Okay, she said. Next month, but I am coming with you. The museum trip happened on a Saturday in early spring, 4 months after the storm that had brought them back together. Xavier arrived early, unable to sleep, too excited about the prospect of an entire day with his children. They drove to the city in Deja's minivan, the twins chattering in the back seat about everything they wanted to see. Xavier sat in the passenger seat, trying not to be obvious about how much he was memorizing this moment. The normalcy of it, the ordinary magic of a family trip. The museum was everything he had hoped. Miles disappeared into the engineering exhibits with single-minded focus, dragging Xavier through displays about structural integrity and load-bearing walls. Mira spent 2 hours at the Animal Rehabilitation Center, asking the staff approximately 400 questions about veterinary care, and somewhere in the middle of it all, something shifted. They were standing in front of a display about bridge construction when Miles tugged on Xavier's sleeve. "Dad, can you explain the difference between suspension and cable-stayed bridges?" The word landed like a thunderclap. "Dad." Miles had called him Dad. Xavier looked at Deja, who stood a few feet away, her eyes wide with surprise. "Of course." Xavier managed to keep his voice steady despite the earthquake happening inside his chest. "So suspension bridges have cables that hang from towers and connect to the deck at regular intervals. Cable-stayed bridges have cables that go directly from the tower to the deck." He explained the engineering principles while Miles listened intently, asking follow-up questions, completely unaware that he had just changed everything with a single syllable. Later, while the twins explored the gift shop, Deja pulled Xavier aside. "He called you Dad." "I noticed. He has never called anyone that before." She looked shaken. "Not my father. Not any man I've dated. Just you. I do not know what to say." "You do not have to say anything. Just do not make me regret letting this happen." "I will not. I hope you mean that. I have never meant anything more in my life." The museum trip ended with ice cream and exhaustion, and 2 children falling asleep in the back seat before they were halfway home. Xavier drove while Deja sat quietly beside him, the kind of comfortable silence that spoke of something changing between them. "Thank you," he said finally. "For today. For all of it. For giving me this chance. Do not thank me. Thank them. They are the ones who decided to trust you. But you let them decide. You could have kept fighting, kept the walls up. Instead, you stepped back and let this happen." "I did not step back. I am still watching every move you make. I am still waiting for you to disappoint them. I know, but you are not rooting for me to fail anymore. I can tell the difference." Deja was quiet for a long moment. "Maybe I am not," she admitted. "Maybe I am starting to believe that people can actually change, that second chances might be real. They are. I am proof of that. Prove it to me. Not today, not this month, year after year after year. Prove it until there is no more room for doubt. I will." And watching him in the dim light of the car, his eyes on the road, her children asleep behind them, Deja found herself wanting to believe him. Not just for the twins, for herself. Because somewhere in the last 4 months, the man who had broken her heart had started to look like someone worth believing in again. The months that followed moved with the quiet certainty of something inevitable taking shape. Xavier continued his visits every 2 weeks without fail. The phone calls remained consistent, Tuesday evenings and Saturday mornings, his schedule now built around the rhythms of his children's lives rather than the demands of his empire. Sir Scales-a-Lot thrived in his temperature-controlled tank, becoming an unlikely symbol of reliability. Miles checked on the fish during every video call, asking pointed questions about water quality and feeding schedules, still testing in his careful way. But something had shifted after the museum trip. The word Dad, once spoken, could not be unspoken. Miles used it sparingly at first, almost accidentally, then more deliberately as the weeks passed. Mira had adopted it immediately, delighted by the simplicity of finally having what other children took for granted. 5 months after the storm, Xavier made an announcement that would change everything. They were having dinner at Deja's house, something that had become routine. Xavier cooking while Deja supervised homework, and the twins set the table with the precision of children who had been given an important job. "I have some news," Xavier said as they sat down to eat. Deja's expression shifted almost imperceptibly. The wariness that never fully left her eyes sharpened into something more guarded. "What kind of news?" Xavier looked at the twins, then back at Deja. "I have been restructuring my company, delegating more responsibilities to my executive team, and I have decided to open a satellite office here in town." Mira's fork clattered against her plate. "Here? You mean close to us?" "Very close. I found a house about 3 miles from here. If everything goes according to plan, I will be living there within 2 months." The twins erupted into noise. Mira was out of her chair, throwing her arms around Xavier's neck. Miles remained seated, but his face had transformed into something Xavier had never seen before. Pure, unguarded joy. "You are moving here?" Miles asked, as if he needed to hear it again to believe it. "For real? Not just visiting?" "For real. I will still have to travel to the city sometimes, maybe 1 week out of every month, but the rest of the time, I will be here, close to you." Deja had not spoken. Xavier met her eyes across the table, searching for her reaction. "That is a significant change," she said carefully. "Your entire operation is based in the city. Your board, your executive team, everything you have built. Everything I built can function without me micromanaging every decision. I have spent months putting the right people in place, creating systems that do not require my constant presence. The company will survive, but Mira and Miles, they are only 6 once. They will only be 7 once, and 8, and every age after that. I do not want to miss any more of their lives than I already have." Mira was still hanging on his neck, her small arms surprisingly strong. "Does this mean you can come to my dance recital?" she asked. "It is in 3 weeks. I have a solo. I would not miss it for anything. And my science fair?" Miles added, his voice carrying an edge of hope he usually kept hidden. "It is the week after Mira's recital. I will be there. Front row." Deja pushed back from the table slowly, her expression unreadable. "Can I speak to you outside for a moment?" Xavier gently disentangled himself from Mira's embrace and followed Deja to the back porch. The evening air was cool, carrying the scent of the garden she had planted in neat rows along the fence. "You should have told me before announcing this to them," she said, her voice low but intense. "That was not fair. You are right. I am sorry. I got caught up in the moment." The moment. Deja crossed her arms, that familiar defensive posture returning. "Do you understand what you have just done? They are going to count the days until you move here. They are going to tell everyone at school. And if something changes, if your board decides this is unacceptable, if your company needs you back full time, they will be devastated. Nothing is going to change. You cannot promise that. Life changes. Business changes. You could wake up tomorrow and decide this small town is too boring, too far from everything you know, too much of a sacrifice. I could, but I will not. How do you know? Because I've already made the sacrifice. I have already stepped back from day-to-day operations. I have already put systems in place. This is not a whim, Deja. This is a decision I have been working toward for months. I just did not tell you because I wanted to be sure it was possible before I raised expectations." She was quiet for a moment, processing this. "Why?" The question came out smaller than her usual voice. "You had everything. The company, the success, the life you built. Why give all that up?" "I did not give it up. I restructured it. And I did it because I finally understand something I should have understood 7 years ago." "What?" Xavier stepped closer, close enough that he could see the uncertainty in her eyes warring with something that might have been hope. "That building an empire means nothing if you have no one to share it with. That success without connection is just expensive loneliness. That I spent 36 years chasing achievements and measuring my worth in zeros, and at the end of it, I had everything I thought I wanted and nothing I actually needed." He paused, letting the words settle. "My children are here. My second chance is here. The opportunity to become someone worth knowing is here. The company can function from anywhere. My life needs to be where they are." Deja's arms slowly uncrossed, some of the tension leaving her shoulders. "You really mean this?" "I really mean this." She looked back toward the house, where the twins were visible through the window, their faces animated with excitement. "They are going to hold you to every word. You know that, right? If you promise to be at that dance recital and you are not there, Mira will remember it forever. If you miss that science fair, Miles will use it as proof that he was right not to trust." "I know. Do you? Because these are not abstract concepts. These are my children. Children who have already learned that adults cannot always be counted on. Children who I have spent 6 years teaching to be resilient because I did not know if anyone would ever show up for them. I will show up. Every time. No matter what." Deja studied him for a long moment. Then she did something unexpected. She stepped forward and wrapped her arms around him. The embrace was brief, lasting only a few seconds, but it was the first time she had voluntarily touched him since the storm. The first time she had offered anything beyond guarded tolerance. "Prove it," she whispered against his shoulder. Every day. Prove it until I stop being afraid. I will. She pulled back, her composure returning. Now go inside and tell those children about their new rooms. Because apparently you have bought a house with rooms for them, and they need to know every detail immediately. The house hunt had actually been happening for weeks, with the twins' input gathered during video calls. Mira had opinions about paint colors and the necessity of a yard big enough for future animals. Miles had concerns about structural integrity and the angle of light for optimal reading conditions. The house Xavier had found met all their requirements. A craftsman-style home on a quiet street, close enough to Deja's house that the children could eventually walk between them. 4 bedrooms, a spacious backyard, a home office where Xavier could work when he was not traveling. He had not shown them pictures yet, wanting to save the reveal for an in-person visit. "Can we see it?" Mira demanded when he returned to the dining room. "The new house? It is not quite ready yet. The previous owners are still moving out, but in 2 weeks, when I come for my next visit, we can do a walkthrough. What does my room look like? I think you should wait and see. But I will tell you this much. The walls can be painted whatever color you want." "Purple," Mira said immediately. "Like Sir Scales a lot." Miles had been quiet, his analytical mind clearly working through something. "Dad," he said finally, using the word with careful deliberation, "does this mean you will be here for regular things, not just special occasions?" "What do you mean by regular things?" "Like breakfast, and helping with homework, and being there when I wake up from a bad dream." The question cut straight to Xavier's heart. This child, so careful with his trust, was asking for something so simple and so enormous. The ordinary presence of a parent. "That is exactly what it means," Xavier said. "Not every single day, because I will still have to travel sometimes. But most days. Regular, ordinary, boring days, where nothing special happens except we are together." Miles nodded slowly, processing this. "Okay," he said. "That sounds acceptable." For Miles, that was practically a declaration of love. The 2 weeks before the house walkthrough felt endless. Xavier had workers adding finishing touches, making sure everything was perfect for the big reveal. He video called the twins every day, fielding their increasingly specific questions about the new house while managing their expectations. "Is there a fireplace?" "Yes." "Does it work?" "Yes, but we will have to be very careful about safety." "Is there a basement?" "Yes." "Can I have a laboratory in the basement?" "We can discuss it." "Is there a backyard big enough for a dog?" "We can discuss that too." When the day finally arrived, Xavier picked up the twins and Deja in a car he had rented specifically for the occasion. Something practical and family-friendly, not the luxury vehicles he usually drove. "You rented a minivan," Deja observed as she climbed into the passenger seat. It seemed appropriate. She looked at him for a long moment, then shook her head slightly. "You are full of surprises lately." The house revealed itself as they turned onto a tree-lined street in the older part of town. Xavier watched the twins' faces in the rearview mirror as they approached. "Is that it?" Mira pressed her nose against the window. "The blue one with the big porch?" "That is it. It has a swing. On the porch. A swing." "I noticed." They piled out of the car, the twins racing up the front walk before Xavier could even unbuckle his seatbelt. He followed at a more measured pace, aware of Deja's presence beside him. "You did not have to do this," she said quietly. "You could have rented an apartment, something temporary, something that did not involve buying a house and painting rooms and building a life here." "I know, but I did not want temporary. I wanted permanent." She did not respond, but something in her expression suggested the words had landed where he intended. The front door opened onto a living room that was still mostly empty, waiting for furniture that had not yet arrived. But the bones of the house were beautiful. Original hardwood floors, high ceilings, windows that let in floods of natural light. Mira spun in circles in the empty space, her voice echoing off the bare walls. "It is so big. You could fit our whole apartment in here. This is just the living room. Wait until you see the rest." The tour took over an hour, with every room requiring detailed examination and discussion. The kitchen, with its modern appliances and breakfast nook. The dining room, with its built-in hutch and chandelier that Mira declared the fanciest thing she had ever seen. The home office, with its wall of windows that Miles approved of for optimal natural light. And then, the moment they had been waiting for. "Ready to see your rooms?" The children nodded with identical intensity. Xavier led them up the stairs to a hallway with 3 doors. He stopped at the first one. "Miles, this is yours." The door swung open to reveal a room that had been carefully designed with one specific child in mind. Built-in bookshelves lined one wall, already partially filled with books about engineering and architecture that Xavier had chosen based on months of conversations. A large desk sat beneath the window, positioned to catch the morning light, and in one corner, a drafting table with proper tools for designing structures. Miles stepped into the room like he was entering a sacred space. His hand reached out to touch the drafting table, tracing the smooth surface with trembling fingers. "This is mine, this is yours." He looked at the books on the shelves, the specialized drawing tools, the adjustable desk lamp designed for precise work. Everything about this room said someone had listened, someone had paid attention, someone had cared enough to notice what mattered to him. Miles turned and walked directly to Xavier, wrapping his arms around him in a fierce, wordless embrace. Xavier held his son, feeling the small body shake slightly with emotion that could not be expressed in words. "Thank you," Miles finally whispered. "It is perfect. You are welcome. You deserve perfect." Mira had been patient through her brother's moment, but her excitement could not be contained much longer. "What about my room?" "Right next door." Her room was everything Mira. The walls were painted a soft lavender, her favorite color. A window seat had been built beneath a large window, perfect for curling up with books. Shelves waited for her growing collection of animal figurines. And best of all, a mural had been painted on one wall, depicting a fantastical landscape of purple dragons soaring over a magical kingdom. She stood in the doorway, speechless for perhaps the first time in her life. "A lady named Maria painted the mural," Xavier explained. "I described what you always talk about, the purple dragons, the magical kingdoms, and she created it. If you do not like it, we can paint over it and try something different." "Do not like it." Mira's voice came out strangled. "It is the most beautiful thing I have ever seen in my whole entire life." She ran to the mural, touching the painted dragons with reverent fingers. "They are perfect." She turned to Xavier with tears in her eyes. "You remembered. Everything I told you about my dragons you remembered." "Of course I remembered. Everything you tell me matters." Deja had been standing in the doorway, watching this unfold. Xavier caught her eye and saw that she was crying too, though she turned away before he could say anything. "There is one more room," Xavier said, guiding everyone back into the hallway. "The 3rd door." "Whose room is this?" Mira asked. "This one is for guests, but really, it is for your mom, for when she visits, or stays over, so she always has a place here that belongs to her." He opened the door to reveal a simple but elegant room decorated in soft greens and creams, Deja's favorite colors. A comfortable bed, a reading chair by the window, a small bathroom attached. Deja stepped inside, her hand touching the quilt on the bed. "You remembered that I like green." "I remember everything." She turned to face him, her expression complicated. "You built a room for me in your house. I built a home for our family. You are part of that family. Whether you stay for an hour or a night or longer, there is always a place for you here." Xavier did not push. He did not demand an answer or a declaration. He simply offered the room and the meaning behind it, then stepped back to let her process. "Can we stay tonight?" Mira asked, bouncing on her toes. "For the first sleepover ever?" Xavier looked at Deja, deferring to her decision. "We do not have any of our things here," Deja said practically. "Pajamas, toothbrushes, clothes for tomorrow. I can go get them," Xavier offered. "Or we can all go back to your house and get what we need and come back. Whatever works for you." "Please, Mama?" Miles rarely begged for anything, which made his request all the more powerful. "I want to sleep in my new room. Just once. To see what it feels like." Deja looked at her children, both watching her with desperate hope. "Okay." She surrendered with a small smile. "We will go get what we need and come back." One night, the first sleepover in the new house, became a memory that Xavier would treasure for the rest of his life. They ordered pizza because the kitchen was not yet stocked. They ate on the floor of the empty living room because there was no dining table yet. The twins explored every corner of the house, claiming spaces, imagining futures, planning modifications they would suggest to their father. At bedtime, Xavier tucked them in for the first time. Miles in his engineering room, already surrounded by the books he had pulled from the shelves. Mira in her purple kingdom, the dragon mural watching over her. "Good night, Dad." Mira's voice was sleepy but content. "I love my room. I love that you love it." Are you going to be here when I wake up? I am going to be here when you wake up. And the morning after that. And the morning after that. For as long as you want me, I want you always. Then always it is. Miles was already half asleep when Xavier reached his room, one of the engineering books open on his chest. The load distribution, Miles murmured. I was reading about foundations. We can talk about it tomorrow. Xavier gently removed the book and pulled the covers up. Get some sleep. Dad? Yes? I am glad you stopped on the highway that night. The words were so simple, but they carried the weight of everything that had come before. The storm, the recognition, the rebuilding. I am glad too, Xavier said. It was the best thing that ever happened to me. Miles's eyes closed, and within moments he was breathing the deep, steady rhythm of sleep. Xavier stood in the doorway for a long moment, watching his son sleep in a room built specifically for him. Then he went downstairs, where Deja sat on the floor of the empty living room, her back against the wall, looking at nothing in particular. They are asleep, out like lights. She nodded slowly, her gaze distant. You built this whole house for them. I built it for all of us, whatever that means, whatever you want it to mean. Deja was quiet for a moment, then she spoke without looking at him. Do you remember what you asked me that first night at the resort, about whether I was happy? I remember. I've been thinking about it ever since, about the difference between content and happy, about whether choosing stability over joy was wisdom or surrender. What did you decide? She turned to look at him then, her eyes bright with something that might have been tears or might have been hope. I decided that maybe I've been so focused on protecting myself from being hurt again that I forgot to consider the possibility that I might not be hurt, that someone might actually show up and stay, that trusting again might not end in disaster. What made you decide that? You. She said the word simply, without drama. You showing up, every time. You calling when you said you would. You remembering the colors and the dragons and the engineering books. You building a room for me in your house without any expectation of what it might mean. I never had any expectations. I know. That is what made it matter. She stood slowly, brushing off her clothes, though there was nothing to brush off. I am not ready for anything more than what we have, she said carefully. Co-parenting, friendship, whatever this is. The walls do not come down overnight, Xavier. You broke me once. The pieces took years to put back together. I understand, but I am not saying never anymore. I used to say never. I used to say that you would never be anything to me except the father of my children. Now I am just saying not yet. Not yet is more than I deserve. She smiled slightly. Yes, it is, but I am giving it to you anyway. Because you earned it. Before we continue with what happens next in this story, I need to speak directly to you. If you are watching this right now, it means something about this journey resonates with you. Maybe you have been hurt by someone you trusted. Maybe you are wondering if people can truly change. Maybe you are trying to find your own way back from a mistake that cost you everything. Whatever brought you here, I want you to know that your engagement matters. Every like, every share, every comment tells the algorithm that stories about redemption and second chances deserve to be heard. So right now, take a second and hit that like button. Share this video with someone who needs to believe that it is never too late to become who you were meant to be. And if you have not subscribed yet, this is your sign. We are building a community here at Mr. Dalton Story House, a community that believes in the power of transformation. Now, let me tell you what happened when everything Xavier had built was put to the ultimate test. 6 months after Xavier moved to town, the crisis arrived. It came in the form of a phone call at 7 in the morning on a Tuesday. Xavier was making breakfast for the twins, a routine that had become sacred, when his phone erupted with the sound reserved for emergencies. Lewis's voice was tight with controlled concern. Sir, there is a situation. The board has called an emergency meeting for tomorrow morning. Harrison and the other investors are threatening a hostile takeover. They are claiming you have abandoned your responsibilities. Xavier set down the spatula, his stomach dropping. What are they basing this on? Your reduced presence, the restructuring you implemented. They are arguing that you are no longer fit to lead, that you have become distracted by personal matters and are neglecting the company's best interests. That is absurd. The company's profits are up 12% since I restructured. It is not about profits, sir. It is about control. Harrison has wanted your seat for years. He sees an opportunity, and he is taking it. The twins had stopped eating, watching their father's face with the careful attention of children who had learned to read adult moods. "Is everything okay, Dad?" Mira asked. Xavier forced a smile that felt as thin as paper. "Everything is fine, sweetheart. Just work stuff. Finish your breakfast." But the look on Miles's face said he did not believe it. That boy missed nothing. The emergency meeting required Xavier's physical presence in the city. There was no way around it. A video call would be seen as evidence of exactly what Harrison was claiming, that Xavier was no longer committed enough to show up when it mattered. He called Deja after dropping the twins at school. "I have to go back to the city. There is a crisis at the company. A group of board members is trying to force me out." "When?" "Tomorrow morning. I will need to fly out tonight to prepare." "How long will you be gone?" "I do not know. A few days at least. Maybe longer if this turns into a protracted fight." There was silence on the line. "Xavier," she said finally. "Mira's dance recital is this Saturday." "I know. You promised you would be there. Front row." "I know. And I will be. I will handle this and be back by Saturday. I give you my word." More silence. When Deja spoke again, her voice was careful. "The last time you made me promises about showing up, you ended up missing the most important moments of my life. You chose work over everything else. You told me you could not deal with complications. This is different." "Is it?" "Because from where I am standing, it looks exactly the same. A crisis at work, a promise that might not be kept, and two children who will be devastated if their father is not where he said he would be." "Deja." "No." She cut him off. "I have heard this before. I believed it before. And I spent 7 years rebuilding my life because of what happened when I believed it." Xavier gripped the phone tighter, feeling the weight of history pressing down on him. "What do you want me to do? If I do not go, I could lose control of everything my father built. Everything I rebuilt after he nearly destroyed it. This company is my family's legacy. And those children are your legacy. The question is, which one matters more?" She hung up before he could respond. Xavier stood in his kitchen, the phone still in his hand, facing the exact same choice he had faced 7 years ago. Work or family, legacy or love, the company or his children. Last time, he had chosen wrong. Last time, he had lost everything that mattered. But what if there was another way? He called Lewis back. "I need you to arrange a flight. But first, I need you to get me everything you can on Harrison's position. Every weakness, every ally, every piece of leverage we might have. We are not going to fight this battle on his terms. We are going to end it in one meeting." "What do you have in mind, sir?" "I'm going to offer them something they do not expect. And then, I'm going to be at my daughter's dance recital on Saturday if I have to burn the entire company down to make it happen." The flight to the city felt longer than any Xavier had taken before. He spent the hours reviewing documents, making calls, building a strategy that would either save his company or destroy it entirely. When he landed, Lewis was waiting with more information. "Harrison has secured the support of 4 other board members. That gives him enough votes to force a restructuring that would remove you as CEO and install him instead. Who is still loyal? 3 members are solidly with you. 2 are undecided. You need to flip at least one of the undecided votes to block the motion. And if I can, then you lose control. The company continues, but under Harrison's leadership. You would retain your shares but have no operational authority." Xavier considered this as the car moved through city traffic. What do the undecided members want? Lewis handed over a folder containing detailed profiles. "Morrison is concerned about stability. He does not trust Harrison's vision but is worried about your commitment. If you can convince him that you are still invested in the company's future, he might stay loyal. And the other one? Delacroix. She is a wild card. She has made noise about corporate responsibility and stakeholder value. She thinks the company has become too focused on short-term profits at the expense of long-term sustainability." Xavier flipped through the profiles, a plan beginning to form. What if we gave her what she wanted? "Sir, what if we proposed a restructuring that kept me as CEO, but shifted our focus toward the kind of sustainable practices she has been advocating for? What if we made her the champion of a new direction rather than a skeptic of the old one? That would require significant changes to operations. It would impact short-term profits, but it would secure long-term support and demonstrate that I am committed to the company's future, not just its immediate gains. It would prove that I have a vision beyond quarterly earnings." Lewis nodded slowly. "It could work, but you would have to be willing to make real changes, not just empty promises." "I am willing. I am willing to do whatever it takes to secure this company and still be at my daughter's recital on Saturday. The board meeting was scheduled for 10 in the morning. Xavier arrived at 8, finding Morrison already in the building. Morrison. Xavier approached the older man with a handshake. Do you have a moment? Robinson. I was not expecting you until the meeting. I wanted to speak with you first, privately. They found an empty conference room. Xavier did not waste time with small talk. I know you are concerned about my commitment. I know Harrison has been telling you that I had checked out, that I am more interested in my personal life than in the company's future. He is not wrong that you have been absent. He is wrong about why. Xavier leaned forward. 6 months ago, I discovered that I have 2 children. 6 years old. I never knew they existed because of choices I made during the worst period of my life. Choices that drove away the woman I loved. Morrison's expression shifted slightly. I did not know. No one did. I kept it private because it is private. But here is what I need you to understand. Finding my children did not make me less committed to this company. It made me more committed to being the kind of person who deserves to lead it. A person who keeps promises. A person who shows up when it matters. A person who builds things that last. Harrison would say that building things that last does not include taking months away from daily operations. Harrison would be wrong. I restructured operations so that the company could function without my constant presence because that is what healthy companies do. They do not collapse when the CEO is not in the room. They have systems, processes, people capable of making decisions. That is resilience. That is sustainability. That is what I built while Harrison was complaining that I was not sitting in my chair enough. Morrison was quiet for a moment. What are you asking for? I am asking for your vote. I am asking you to trust that the changes I have made were strategic, not abandonment. And I am asking you to believe that I can lead this company into its next chapter while also being present for my children in ways I was not capable of before. And if I give you my vote, what happens then? Then I implement a plan that transforms this company. A plan that includes Delacroix's sustainability initiatives. A plan that positions us for long-term growth rather than short-term gains. A plan that proves I have a vision beyond just maintaining what exists. Morrison studied him for a long moment. You have changed. I have. 6 months ago, you would have fought Harrison by trying to outmaneuver him politically. You would have called in favors and twisted arms. This is different. This is you actually believing in something. I do believe in something. I believe that building an empire means nothing if you have no one to share it with. I believe that success without connection is just expensive loneliness. And I believe that I can run this company and be a father at the same time, because those things do not have to be in conflict. Morrison stood, extending his hand. You have my vote. The meeting with Delacroix went differently, but ended with the same result. Xavier presented his sustainability proposal, showing her the specific changes he was willing to implement. Reduced carbon footprint, improved labor practices in overseas facilities, investment in renewable energy for their shipping fleet. This is not just corporate greenwashing, Delacroix said, examining the documents. These are real commitments with real timelines. I do not do things halfway anymore. Either something matters enough to do properly, or it does not matter at all. What changed? She looked at him with the direct gaze of someone who had seen too many empty promises from executives. 6 months ago, you barely acknowledged that sustainability was a concern. Now you are proposing the most aggressive environmental initiative in the company's history. I found something that made me see differently. Xavier met her eyes without flinching. I found my children, and I realized that I was building a company they would inherit in a world I was helping to damage. That perspective changes things. Delacroix nodded slowly. I have been on this board for 8 years. I have seen a lot of executives talk about values they do not actually have. But this feels different. It is different. You have my vote, and my support for these initiatives. But Robinson, if you are lying to me, if this is just a strategy to survive the meeting and then go back to business as usual, I will become your worst enemy. I would expect nothing less. The board meeting itself was almost anticlimactic. Harrison presented his motion. Xavier presented his counterproposal. The votes were cast, 8-4 in Xavier's favor. Harrison's takeover attempt failed, but Xavier did not stay to celebrate. As soon as the vote was confirmed, he was on his feet. Gentleman, lady, I appreciate your confidence. My executive team will handle implementation of the initiatives we discussed. Now, if you will excuse me, I have a flight to catch. Harrison stared at him with undisguised hatred. You just won the biggest battle of your career, and you are leaving? I just won the fight to remain CEO of my father's company. Now I need to go keep a promise to my daughter. Those things are not in conflict. They are both part of who I am now. He was at the airport within an hour. The flight back would get him home by 9 in the evening. The recital started at 2 in the afternoon on Saturday. Plenty of time. But the universe, it seemed, had other plans. The flight was delayed. Mechanical issues, the airline announced. They were working on it. Estimated departure time pushed back by 2 hours. Then 3. Then, indefinitely. Xavier watched the departure board with growing desperation as the hours ticked away. He called Lewis. Find me another flight. Charter something. I do not care what it costs. I am working on it, sir. But the weather system moving in has grounded most private aviation. There is a window tomorrow morning, but nothing tonight. Tomorrow morning will be too late. The recital starts at 2. I understand, sir. I am doing everything I can. Xavier hung up and stood in the middle of the airport terminal, surrounded by frustrated travelers, facing the exact scenario he had promised would never happen. He had done everything right. He had fought for his company. He had secured his position. He had kept his professional promises. And now forces beyond his control were going to make him break the promise that mattered most. He called Deja. I am stuck at the airport. The flight is delayed. They do not know when it will take off. Silence on the other end. Xavier, if you are not here tomorrow, I know what you are going to say, but I did everything I could. I won the board meeting. I secured the company. I left immediately, and now the planes are grounded. More silence. Then, quietly, she has been practicing for weeks, every day after school, in her room before bed. She talks about you being there constantly. Dad is going to see my solo. Dad is going to be in the front row. The words cut deeper than any boardroom defeat ever could. I am going to be there. I am going to find a way. Xavier, no. Listen to me. I am not giving up. I do not care if I have to drive through the night. I do not care if I have to walk. I am going to be at that recital, front row, just like I promised. He hung up and started walking toward the airport exit. If planes were not an option, there had to be another way. Lewis called back 30 minutes later. Sir, I found something. There is a train leaving in 2 hours that will get you to Riverside Junction by morning. From there, I can have a car waiting. You will arrive home by noon. Plenty of time before the recital. Book it. Already done. Your ticket is at will call. Lewis. Xavier paused. Thank you. Of course, sir. Now go catch your train. The journey was miserable. Overnight train travel was not designed for comfort, especially in the middle seats that were all that remained available at such short notice. Xavier did not sleep. He could not sleep. Every minute that passed was another minute closer to either keeping or breaking the most important promise he had ever made. He arrived at Riverside Junction at 9 in the morning, exhausted, rumpled, and more determined than he had ever been in his life. The car Lewis had arranged was waiting. The driver, a local man with a skeptical expression, looked at Xavier's disheveled appearance. Long night? You have no idea. How fast can you get me to Maple Street? Depends on traffic. Probably 90 minutes. Xavier checked his watch. The recital started at 2. Doors opened at 1:30. He would make it with time to spare, unless something else went wrong. Nothing else went wrong. Xavier arrived at his house at 10:45. He showered, changed into clean clothes, and was at the school auditorium by 1:15, standing at the front of the line waiting for the doors to open. When Deja arrived with the twins at 1:30, she found him exactly where he had promised to be. Front row, just like he said. Mira saw him first. Her face transformed from nervous anticipation to pure, radiant joy. Dad, you came. She ran to him, throwing herself into his arms. Of course I came. I told you I would be here. But Mama said there was a problem with your flight. She said you might not make it. There was a problem. And I found another way, because I was not going to miss this for anything in the world. Mira pulled back to look at him, her small hands on his cheeks. You look tired. I am tired. I did not sleep at all. But that is okay. Seeing you dance is going to be better than any sleep. Deja had approached more slowly, miles beside her. She studied Xavier with an expression he could not quite read. You drove all night. Took a train, actually. Then drove. But yes, all night. Why? Because I made a promise. And I keep my promises now. She stared at him for a long moment. Then she did something that made everything else disappear. She kissed him. It was brief, just a brush of her lips against his. But it was the first time she had kissed him in 7 years. The first time she had chosen to close the distance between them. "Thank you," she whispered, "for proving me wrong." The recital was beautiful. Mira's solo was a 3-minute piece about a butterfly emerging from a cocoon, and she danced it with all the fierce grace of a 6-year-old who had practiced until perfect. Xavier watched through tears he did not bother to hide. His daughter, dancing on stage, looking for him in the audience, and smiling when she found him exactly where he promised he would be. Front row, just like he said. After the recital, the family went out for ice cream to celebrate. The twins chattered about everything, Mira reliving every moment of her solo, Miles providing technical critiques that no one had asked for but everyone found amusing. And through it all, Deja sat beside Xavier, her hand occasionally brushing his, something new and fragile growing between them. Later that night, after the twins were asleep, they sat on Xavier's porch, looking at stars that were visible in a way they never were in the city. "You actually did it," Deja said. "You fought for your company, and then moved heaven and earth to keep a promise to a 6-year-old. She is not just any 6-year-old. She is my daughter. I know, but that is not what I mean." Deja turned to face him. 7 years ago, if you had faced the same choice, you would have stayed for the board meeting. You would have considered the recital a nice thing that had to be sacrificed for more important priorities. You would have made excuses and explained why work had to come first. I was a different person then. I know. I am finally starting to believe it. She reached for his hand, intertwining her fingers with his. "I spent 7 years being angry at you. Then I spent 6 months being cautious around you, waiting for you to revert, waiting for the old Xavier to show up and prove that people do not really change. They just learn to hide better. And now I think maybe I was wrong. Maybe people can change. Maybe second chances are real. Maybe the person you are now is actually who you were always capable of being. You just had not found the reason to become him yet." "The reason is in there sleeping," Xavier said. "2 of them, and 1 more sitting beside me." Deja leaned her head against his shoulder. "I am not saying I am ready for everything. I still have walls. I still have fears. But I am saying I want to find out who we could be together. Not who we were. Who we could become." Xavier put his arm around her, pulling her close. "I want that too." They sat in silence for a while, watching the stars wheel overhead, 2 people who had found each other again after 7 years of being lost. The story does not end there, of course. Real stories never truly end. They continue, evolve, face new challenges. A year after the storm on the highway, Xavier and Deja stood in her mother's backyard, surrounded by close friends and family, exchanging vows they had written themselves. Mira served as flower girl, scattering purple petals with more enthusiasm than precision. Miles carried the rings with the solemn responsibility of someone who understood that this moment mattered. When Xavier spoke his vows, he addressed all 3 of them. "I spent years building an empire, and I would trade every dollar, every accolade, every success for the chance to do this right. To be the husband Deja deserves and the father these children deserve. Not the man I was, but the man I have learned to become." Deja's vows were simpler, but no less powerful. "I thought I knew what love looked like. I thought it meant never being hurt, never being let down, never having to trust someone with the power to disappoint me. But real love, I have learned, means giving someone the chance to prove they have changed. It means believing in second chapters. It means building something new from the pieces of what broke. You showed up. You stayed. That is everything." The kiss that sealed their marriage was nothing like the brief brush in the auditorium lobby. This was a declaration, a promise, a beginning. If you have made it this far in this story, I need to say something to you directly. You have watched Xavier go from the man who called his children a complication to the father who took an overnight train to keep a promise. You have watched Deja go from a woman whose walls were impenetrable to someone willing to risk her heart again. This story is not just about them. It is about the possibility that exists in all of us. The possibility to become better than we were. The possibility to earn back what we lost. The possibility to prove that our worst moments do not have to define our entire lives. If this story moved you, if it gave you hope, if it made you believe even for a moment that second chances are real, then I need you to do something. Hit that like button. Drop a comment telling me your own story of redemption or transformation. Share this video with someone who needs to hear that it is never too late to change. And subscribe to this channel if you have not already, because this is what we do here at Mr. Dalton Story House. We tell stories that matter. Stories about messy, complicated, imperfect people who find their way back to what matters. Thank you for watching. Thank you for believing. And remember, the most important chapter of your life might still be unwritten. The epilogue came 5 years after the wedding. Xavier stood in the kitchen of the house that had become home, making breakfast for 3 children now instead of 2. A toddler sat in a high chair, banging a spoon against the tray, while Miles, now 12, worked on homework at the kitchen table, and Mira practiced veterinary techniques on a very patient stuffed animal. Deja came downstairs, her hair still wet from the shower, reaching for the coffee Xavier had already prepared for her. "Morning," she said, kissing him briefly. "What is the plan for today?" "Miles has his architecture competition at noon. Mira has soccer at 3, and we need to take the baby to get his pictures done before dinner." The logistics of family life, the ordinary chaos that had become Xavier's favorite kind of complexity. "Dad." Miles looked up from his homework. "Can you come early to the competition? I want to show you my design before the judges see it. I would not miss it. And afterward, can we get ice cream?" Mira had abandoned the stuffed animal and was now negotiating. "If Miles wins, we should celebrate. And if I do not win," Miles asked, "then we still get ice cream because we are supportive." That seems like a flawed incentive structure. That seems like you overthinking ice cream. The doorbell rang. Xavier opened it to find Louis standing on the porch with a folder of documents. "The quarterly report, sir, and a message from the board. They have approved your proposal for the expanded sustainability initiative." "Excellent." Xavier took the folder. "Thank you, Louis. Come in for coffee?" "I should not intrude on family time." "It is not intruding if you are family." Louis had been part of their lives for so long now that excluding him felt wrong. He joined them at the breakfast table, accepting coffee and the toddler's enthusiastic attempts to share soggy cereal. This was Xavier's life now, not the empire he had once measured himself by, but this. Chaotic mornings and architecture competitions and soccer games and family dinners. The ordinary, extraordinary miracle of showing up every single day. Later that evening, after the competitions and the games and the photographs, Xavier sat on the porch watching the sunset. Deja joined him, leaning into his side the way she had that first night on this same porch. "What are you thinking about?" she asked. "The storm." He said it simply. "That night on the highway, what would have happened if I had not stopped? You would have driven past and never known, and they would have grown up without me. You would have kept building your life. Everything would have been different. But you did stop." "I did. Why?" She had asked this question before, but his answer had evolved over the years. "I used to think it was chance, random impulse. But now I think it was something else. I think some part of me knew that my life was empty and was looking for a way to fill it. And when I saw that car on the side of the road, when I saw that figure in the rain, something in me recognized the chance I was being given. The chance to change. The chance to become who I was supposed to be all along." Deja kissed his cheek. "I am glad you stopped. So am I, every single day. So am I." The sun continued its descent, painting the sky in shades of purple that Mira would have approved of. Inside the house, the sounds of their children arguing about nothing important drifted through open windows. Louis was probably mediating, as he often did. Xavier Robinson, the billionaire who had once measured his worth in zeros and achievements, sat on his porch in a small town, surrounded by the only things that had ever truly mattered. Not the empire he had built, though that still thrived. Not the success he had achieved, though that remained. But the family he had found, the woman he had earned, the children he had shown up for day after day, until showing up was no longer a choice, but simply who he was. Some people spend their whole lives searching for what matters. Xavier had been lucky enough to find it on the side of a highway in the middle of a storm, when he made the simple decision to stop for someone who needed help. That decision had changed everything. That decision had saved him. And every day, in ways large and small, he worked to be worthy of the second chance he had been given. Not because he had to, but because he finally understood what it meant to want to. The story of the billionaire who stopped for a stranded driver and found his family was never really about wealth or power or corporate success. It was about becoming, about the courage to change. about the choice to show up, and about the simple, profound truth that the most important things in life are not things at all. They are people. They are promises kept. They are ordinary mornings and extraordinary love. They are second chances, earned one day at a time. And they are always, always worth fighting for.